Three sisters walked home on a warm summer night in 1993. They never made it back. No bodies, no suspects, no answers. 31 years later, a single rusted bracelet buried beneath a demolished house unlocked a secret more disturbing than anyone was ready for. What you're about to witness is more than just a story. It's a buried truth clawing its way back to the surface. If you crave the untold, the forgotten, and the chillingly real, then subscribe now and turn on the bell, because here, we don't just tell stories, we resurrect them. Stay tuned. What comes next will change everything. Green Hollow was the kind of town that didn't make the news unless a tractor parade went awry or someone won a pie contest at the county fair. Tucked quietly between two low mountain ridges in Oregon, it was a town where people didn't lock their doors and neighbors still dropped by unannounced with baked goods. That all changed on the night of August 17th, 1993. The Wexley sisters, Catherine, Lillian, and Emily, aged 17, 14, and 9 respectively, left the community pool around 7:45 p.m., laughing and dripping water from their hair, their beach towels slung across their shoulders. They were seen walking along Maple Avenue just 6 blocks from their home. They never arrived. By 9 p.m., their mother, Margaret Wexley, was pacing. By 10:30, she had called the police. By sunrise, flyers were being stapled to telephone poles. Their faces were on every local news channel by nightfall, but the case never broke. No blood, no footprints, no witnesses. Just 3 girls who vanished into the humid twilight of a town that had never seen evil so close. Investigators tore through the area. They dredged the lake, interrogated neighbors, brought in psychics. Cadaver dogs caught a scent once, near a drainage pipe, but it led nowhere. Time passed. Leads faded. The town grieved, speculated, moved on. But the Wexley house never healed. Margaret kept the girls' bedrooms untouched, their school pictures still taped to the fridge, their clothes folded in drawers like they might walk through the door any day. But they didn't. For 3 decades, the disappearance of the Wexley sisters haunted Green Hollow like a ghost too polite to knock, always present, never speaking, until the spring of 2024. In early March 2024, a demolition crew was clearing out an abandoned house at 31 Silver Pine Drive, a 2-story structure that had rotted quietly into itself over the years. Mold, mildew, and raccoons had taken over. The house had been owned by a man named James Eckhart, who died in 2011 from a heart attack. A loner, no kids, no family. As the crew knocked down a section of the kitchen floor, something small and metallic clinked loudly against the concrete foundation. One of the workers bent down and picked it up. It was a charm bracelet. Small, rusted, child-sized. Attached to the chain were 3 letter charms, C, L, and E. The demolition halted. Authorities were called. Forensics swept the place. DNA analysis on the bracelet confirmed it belonged to Emily Wexley, the youngest sister. It was the first physical evidence in the case since 1993. Detective Maya Lennox, a seasoned investigator from the State Cold Case Unit, took over. Lennox was methodical, brilliant, and fiercely unsentimental. The kind of person who made the truth talk. She dug into the history of the house. Nothing suspicious on the surface. Eckhart had moved into the property in 1989. Worked as a handyman, paid his taxes. Had no record. But one thing stuck out. In 1993, the summer the girls vanished, he abruptly stopped working for nearly 6 weeks. No explanation, no medical records, no job activity, just a blank spot. And on August 18th, the day after the girls disappeared, he had a large dumpster delivered to his house. That dumpster was never accounted for. Lennox tracked down anyone who had ever interacted with Eckhart. Most described him the same way: quiet, kept to himself, fixed things well, a man who didn't talk much. But then she found Angela Dorsey, a retired nurse who used to live next door to Eckhart in the 90s. In 1993, she had filed a noise complaint, but no one had followed up. "It wasn't just noise," Angela said during the interview. "It was screaming, children. I called twice. They said it was probably the TV." Her statement hadn't been taken seriously. It was the 90s, and in a small town like Green Hollow, screaming girls were more likely to be dismissed as rowdy teenagers than anything darker. Angela also recalled something else. 3 days after the screams, she noticed Eckhart digging in his backyard late at night. She thought he was burying garbage or repairing a pipe. She never asked. The backyard had since been overtaken by weeds and blackberry thickets, but when ground-penetrating radar was brought in, it revealed a void, a 6-foot-deep cavity beneath the old tool shed. They dug. They found a small, square wooden box. Inside, wrapped in plastic and layers of old newspapers, were 3 school ID cards, partially decomposed, but still legible. Catherine, Lillian, Emily. But there were no remains, and no blood. Only a note written in smudged pencil. They didn't die here. This was just the beginning. The discovery of the ID cards caused national news to swarm Green Hollow. Reporters set up outside the old Wexley home. Margaret, now 72, gave no interviews. She had buried her hope decades ago and wasn't ready to dig it back up. Lennox returned to the forensics report from Eckhart's property. In the attic, they had found a locked chest that took hours to crack open. Inside were hundreds of photographs. Most were of mundane things: birds, tools, pieces of wood. But some were deeply unsettling. A photo of a girl's hand bound at the wrist, a blurry shot of someone crying in a corner, and then a Polaroid of 3 girls sitting in what looked like a basement lined with red wallpaper, all wearing matching white nightgowns. The timestamp on the back read September 14th, 1993, 4 weeks after they vanished, which meant they were alive, at least for a while, and yet there were no bodies. No further evidence, just that note, and those haunting photos. But it was one detail in the photographs that cracked the story open. In the corner of one image, almost out of frame, was a painting on the wall, a crude, childlike depiction of a boat with a name on it. The Brigham. Awesome. Let's continue the formatted story. Clean paragraphs, no edits, no word loss. Exactly as promised. The Brigham was the name of a decommissioned steamboat docked 3 counties away in a rural village called Elmer's Ferry. Once used for tourism, it had been gutted and repurposed over the years. A floating museum, then an art studio, then abandoned entirely in 1995. Lennox drove to Elmer's Ferry. The Brigham was still there. Moored and crumbling, its hull split open like a forgotten carcass. She and her team searched every inch of the boat. Most of it had fallen into decay, but deep in the lower deck, behind a rusted metal panel, they found something shocking. 3 names scratched into the wall in messy, desperate handwriting. Catherine was taken first. Lillian tried to fight. Emily was too small to scream. And below it, a final line etched so deep into the wood it nearly broke through. We are not alone here. There were no fingerprints, no human remains. Just a mattress, an old bucket, and the overwhelming sense that something had happened there. Something cruel and calculated. The narrative had changed. This wasn't a random abduction. This was planned and executed over weeks, possibly with help. While investigators combed through the Brigham, another discovery shifted the direction of the case entirely. Inside a false panel near the captain's quarters, they found a weathered leather notebook. Its pages were brittle, stained with mildew and time. The handwriting was small and frantic, often written in the margins. It wasn't Eckhart's handwriting. The notebook seemed to belong to someone named D. Harland. Detective Lennox ran the name through state records. Nothing came up immediately. But buried in archived employment files was a faint hit. Douglas Harland, age 27 in 1993, briefly employed as a maintenance technician for the Green Hollow Recreation Center, the same facility where the Wexley sisters had last been seen swimming the night they disappeared. His employment ended in late August 1993, a week after the girls went missing. The notebook held disturbing entries. Most were erratic and paranoid, but a few stood out. August 10th, 1993. Eckhart says they'll be quiet, says it's only temporary. I don't think the little one understands. He paid extra this time. August 18th, 1993. 3 now. I didn't agree to 3. That wasn't the deal. I don't like the Red Room. It feels like someone else is watching us. There's something wrong here. September 12th, 1993. Emily cried again. Catherine tried to bribe me with her bracelet. I told her I wasn't the enemy, but I might be. There was one more line, dated September 17th. It's not just him. I finally saw her. She gave the orders. Her. Until now, investigators had only been looking for male suspects. The idea that a woman could be behind this, or perhaps leading it, shattered every assumption built over 3 decades. Detective Lennox went back to the only person who had lived with the trauma longer than anyone, Margaret Wexley, the girl's mother. She was reluctant to speak, tired, cold-eyed, worn down by 31 years of unanswered questions. But when Lennox mentioned the name Douglas Harland, Margaret froze. Then she whispered, almost like a ghost remembering its name. He wasn't a stranger. Margaret admitted that Douglas had dated her, briefly, in early 1993. They'd met at a church event. It lasted only 3 months. He was odd, secretive. When she ended things, he became possessive. Once, she caught him sitting in a parked car outside her home late at night, just watching. She reported it. Nothing came of it. And then she never saw him again. The timing was eerie. But it got worse. When asked why she never told police about Douglas during the original investigation, Margaret hesitated, then confessed something that shattered Lennox to her core. I thought I was being punished. She revealed that a week before her daughters disappeared, she had received a letter in the mail. No return address. Just a single typed message. You chose your church over your girls. Now choose your silence. She had burned the letter, out of shame, out of fear, out of the twisted belief that someone had taken her daughters to punish her. Lennox knew then, this wasn't just about the girls, it was personal. Further digging revealed that Douglas Harland had lived under an alias for years after 1993, renting cabins, moving between counties, always staying off the grid. In 2002, he died in a fire that consumed a barn he was squatting in. The cause was never determined, but before his death, he'd left behind something no one noticed until now. In the attic of the old barn, buried beneath layers of soot and debris, investigators found a box labeled Brigham Records. Inside were receipts, maps, schedules. Meticulous notes about people who had boarded the Brigham over the years, and among them, a guest logbook that didn't match public records. The names were aliases. Some were coded, but 2 stood out. Mrs. Rose. Penny Bell. Cross-referencing photos and handwriting samples, Lennox identified Mrs. Rose as a woman named Helen Strayer, now 67, living under a new identity in New Mexico. She had worked as a school counselor in Green Hollow in the 90s. She had also abruptly moved 2 months after the girls disappeared. When Lennox visited her, she denied everything at first, but when presented with the photographs from the Brigham, her demeanor cracked. She didn't confess. Not exactly. But she said this: "You don't know what we were trying to stop. You don't know what those girls were meant for." And then she whispered something else. Something that would send shivers through the entire investigation. There were more boats, more than just the Brigham. Here comes the next part of the story, continuing in the same clean, plain paragraph style. No detail removed, everything intact. The statement opened a horrifying possibility. The Green Hollow sisters weren't the only ones. Lennox and her team began digging through unsolved missing persons cases between 1989 and 1995, all within 50 miles of Oregon's Columbia River tributaries. They found 6 other cases involving young girls, all under 18, all last seen near water, all disappeared without a trace. What if the Brigham wasn't an isolated hideout, but part of a trafficking ring? It was a theory too dark to say out loud at first, but the puzzle pieces were snapping together. Eckhart, Harland, and Helen weren't just acting alone. There was a network, a system, and possibly a buyer. Lennox requested an FBI involvement. A new task force was formed. Investigations were launched in 3 states, but still, no bodies, no final answers, no closure. Until something completely unexpected happened. Emily Wexley's dental records flagged a match. Not for remains, but for a woman, alive. On June 4th, 2024, a routine dental checkup at a clinic in Reno, Nevada, flagged a red alert in a federal database. A woman named Hannah Doyle, age listed as 34, had dental structures matching that of Emily Wexley, the youngest of the 3 missing sisters, presumed dead since 1993. When authorities arrived, the woman was working as a bartender at a small roadside bar off Highway 80. She was calm, polite, completely unaware that her routine dental visit had unearthed a 31-year-old mystery. DNA confirmed it within 72 hours. Hannah Doyle was, in fact, Emily Wexley, alive, under a false identity, and completely unaware of who she really was. She had no memory before the age of 12. She claimed to have been raised by a woman she knew only as Miss Bell. That name echoed like a gunshot through the investigation. Penny Bell, the second alias from the Brigham Ledger. It turned out Penny Bell had lived in a cabin community in Oregon in the late 90s, using a different name. She homeschooled Emily under the alias of Hannah Doyle until 2002, then vanished. No tax records, no bank accounts, no death certificate, and no trace of Catherine or Lillian. Emily, or Hannah, had grown up thinking her mother had adopted her under strange circumstances. She remembered blurry red wallpaper, a mattress on the floor, a boat she was never allowed to speak of, but none of it made sense to her until now. Emily had escaped something, or had been saved from something, but she couldn't remember what. The trauma had wiped her memory clean. With intensive trauma therapy, Emily slowly began recalling fragments. She remembered being in a room with Catherine, who would hum songs to calm her. She remembered Lillian telling her not to scream, not to make noise. She remembered a man with a beard who smelled like sawdust. And then she remembered the red room. There was a trap door, she said, underneath the floor. Catherine said if we ever got split up, I had to hide there. Lennox and the task force returned to the Brigham. Beneath the warped remains of the red-painted room, they discovered a sealed subcompartment under the floorboards. Inside were child-sized clothing scraps, bones from small animals, and one more thing, a tooth. Dental analysis confirmed it belonged to Lillian Wexley. It was the first physical confirmation that one of the sisters had died. Emily broke down when she was told. She had clung to a thread of hope that maybe they had all escaped together, maybe they'd been separated and survived. But the truth was, she had survived alone. Her sisters were almost certainly dead. But by whose hand and why still remained unknown. Just as the case felt like it was reaching its climax, another twist arrived. This one hidden in the school library of Green Hollow Middle School. An old janitor, after seeing the news coverage, called in. He said he remembered something strange from 1993. A book that had gone missing, only to reappear weeks later with pages glued together and what looked like writing in the margins. The book was still in the archive. A children's novel, Bridge to Terabithia. Inside, scrawled on the inside back cover in pencil, was a tiny message written by hand. "My name is Catherine Wexley. If you find this, we are alive. Tell my mother we love her. Don't trust the lady in blue. She says she wants to help us, but she's lying." The date beside the message was September 23rd, 1993. That was 5 weeks after the disappearance, and 2 weeks before all records of the girl stopped cold. Who was the lady in blue? Was it Penny Bell, Helen Strayer, or someone higher up? Someone whose identity had been buried for decades? Lennox didn't have the full answer. But she knew one thing. The cover-up ran deeper than anyone imagined. And someone, even now, was trying to keep it hidden. A tip from a former ferry worker led investigators to a forgotten riverside plot about 10 miles downstream from Elmer's Ferry, once owned by a private religious group called the Benevolent River Community. They were disbanded in 1996, their founder arrested for tax fraud. But the group's property included a small fenced-in cemetery. 10 graves. No names, just small stone markers with dates and Roman numerals. Lennox ordered a dig. 7 of the 10 graves held human remains. All female, all under the age of 18. 3 were too decomposed to identify. 4 were eventually matched to the missing girls from surrounding counties. None were Catherine Wexley. Her body, like her fate, remained a mystery. But there was now irrefutable proof the Green Hollow sisters were part of something far larger. A coordinated operation. A network built on secrecy, manipulation, and death. One final piece of the puzzle came in July 2024 from an anonymous delivery to Detective Lennox's office. A plain manila envelope, no return address. Inside, a VHS tape, a typed letter, and a flash drive. The letter read, "This is everything you were never supposed to find. I can't be part of it anymore. The truth is uglier than you think. Start with the video." The VHS showed James Eckhart in what looked like a private confession. He sat alone in a basement, sweat on his forehead, eyes empty. "They promised we were saving them," he said, "that the girls were broken and needed correction. They made us believe we were doing God's work, but it was never about salvation. It was control, power. I didn't kill them, but I let it happen. That's worse." The flash drive contained files, documents linking 5 other towns to similar disappearances between 1990 and 1996. All with the same patterns, all with the same silence. But the most chilling file, a scanned registry sheet from a psychiatric hospital in Idaho, dated 2001. Name, Catherine Wexley. Status, admitted under alias June Morrigan. Diagnosis, severe trauma. Dissociative amnesia. Note, subject claims to have escaped from a floating prison. Part 15, the woman called June Morrigan. Detective Lennox drove to St. Eliza's Psychiatric Hospital in Idaho the next morning. The building was clean, modern, a far cry from the darkness its records held. When she requested access to patient June Morrigan, the front desk hesitated. According to their files, June had been discharged in 2005, placed under a witness protection initiative that was classified even to the hospital. But Lennox pulled every string she could. It took 2 weeks, 2 subpoenas, and a federal override. When she finally got access to the archived therapy tapes, her hands trembled. There, on a grainy 2002 recording, sat a pale young woman, eyes hollow, voice fragile. She said her name wasn't June, it was Catherine, and she had escaped. They took us to the boat first, the Brigham, but it was just the holding place. After Lillian died, they moved us. Emily was too young. I begged them to let her go. I don't know what happened after that. I remember the painting of a lighthouse. Red wallpaper. The woman in blue. She had a tattoo on her wrist. A raven. She always smelled like lavender and mint. She called herself Mother. Lennox zoomed in on the image. The camera caught a faint bracelet on the woman's wrist, a homemade band with a tiny charm shaped like a seashell. The same bracelet Emily remembered seeing in a box years later. It was her. It was Catherine. Alive. Institutionalized. Forgotten. But why hadn't anyone found her? Why hadn't the Wexleys been notified? That was the final twist. A follow-up investigation revealed that Catherine Wexley had been listed as a Jane Doe, even though she had whispered her real name to nurses multiple times. Her file had been sealed by a state-level directive, signed by a now-retired FBI agent connected to the early investigation into the benevolent river community. It was a cover-up, an intentional burial of her identity. Why? Because Catherine remembered too much. She had seen names, faces, meetings. She had overheard conversations about transactions, buyers, and donors, all linked to wealthy men and women across the state. If she spoke, it would expose everything. And so she was silenced, not by violence, but by bureaucracy, labeled unstable, hidden away. Lennox pushed to have Catherine released. After weeks of legal battles and psychological evaluations, she was finally cleared and reunited with Emily in August 2024. Two sisters, one without memory, one with too many. They wept in silence when they saw each other. Emily whispered, "You kept me safe." Catherine replied, "You gave me a reason to survive." Lillian was gone. Her remains, buried near the Brigham, were laid to rest in a proper ceremony. The town of Green Hollow held a vigil. Margaret Wexley, now 72, sat between her two surviving daughters, their hands clasped tightly around hers. She said nothing to the crowd. She didn't need to. Her silence was the weight of 3 decades of heartbreak, lifted just enough to breathe. The case files were closed under a new name, the River Girls Investigation. Over the next year, 8 arrests were made. Former members of the benevolent river community, Brigham operators, and one retired state official who had accepted bribes to hide evidence. The network was dismantled, but scars remained. In late 2024, Catherine published a memoir under the title Red Rooms and River Bones. It was raw, devastating, and beautiful. Her attempt to give voice to the children who were never found. In the final chapter, she wrote, "People think the worst part is being taken. It's not. The worst part is being forgotten. That's what they counted on, that no one would remember us, that no one would keep looking. But the river gives things back. Sometimes it just takes a very, very long time." Emily now advocates for missing children nationwide. Catherine lives quietly in Oregon, painting landscapes and riverscapes. And the town of Green Hollow, once haunted, now holds an annual memorial for the lost.